Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, it is I am the one and only Silver the Hedgehog here, and once again I am back for the likes of the Mexi Toys videos. And ladies and gentlemen, welcome back for some more of Let's Play of Sonic and the Black Knight for the Nintendo Wii. So, last time, we essentially did manage to explore into not one, not two, but three new stages, which appears to be Crystal Cave, and in addition to Molten Mine, and of course, most notably, Faraway Alphalon, which as a result though, we did somehow manage to went through 3 missions in Crystal Cave, and then as far as the forms of Molten Mine is concerned, we did somehow manage to focusing on 2 missions in that particular stage, and of course we did somehow taking down the only mission in Faraway Alphalon, which appears to be faced up against with King Arthur for the second and probably the final time. And speaking of boss fights though, we also did manage to face off against with Sir Percival, or in some cases Blaze the Cat, and I found that boss to be kind of tricky. Well, usually relatively speaking, I somehow thrashed King Arthur no problem, especially with all that. Well, you get the idea for this point. So today, for this video, is that we are about to be continue playing through Sonic and the Black Knight, because as far as I mentioned about this since yesterday, the game is not over yet, because as it turns out, that as you can tell, we somehow managed to unlock the next stage, which appears to be Knight's Passage. So as far as I'm aware, I was originally trying to actually focusing on one of those optional missions in Camelot Castle, which appears to be go for the goal, reach the goal, but I might actually give that a pass, especially considering about the fact that what matters the most is about the fact that when it comes to story progression, as far as I'm aware, because after we somehow manage to deal with the forms of King Arthur, we might able to actually come across into ourselves a pretty interesting plot twist. So either way, let's go and hop into Knight's Passage and beat the clock mission. So
We have orders from the king. Have you any last words?
Your king was nothing more than an illusion my grandfather conjured up.
You'd better start explaining, Merlina.
Merlina!
You! How did you come by that scabbard? Where is the king?
Wait.
This was all he left after he disappeared in a puff of smoke. Just like one of the knights of the underworld.
There was never any King Arthur.
Huh?
Well done. And thank you, Sonic. With this scabbard, I can erase my grandfather's greatest mistake.
What?
I shall make this kingdom eternal.
Sonic, get back!
oh, so apparently though, according to what the forms of what Molina did said earlier, that King Arthur is nothing more than illusion. So because of that though, it was all thanks to the forms of Molina did somehow manage to be able to use her scabbard to potentially try to able to use the ultimate power of some kind. So, yeah, that seems very interesting when it comes to the plot twist, especially back in 2009. It is quite interesting to say the least, especially considering about the fact that at this point in time, after we've gathered, you know, the 3 secret swords while we try to defeat the 3 Knights of the Round Table, and it turns out for the fact that we simply managed able to defeat King Arthur for nothing, which even then, I know it's almost like a, some sort of like a test schedule or something like that. I mean, it has been quite a while since I actually have last played this game for sure, since like a couple of hours ago, despite the fact that, ironically, like I mentioned since the very end of the last video, my Wii actually just somehow suffered an error has occurred message again. I can't believe how it done that. So, but anyway, here's the Forms of Knight's Passage, and as you can see, that we have to deal with this particular mission within a time limit. And does that look a bit familiar to you? Well, if you ever played Sonic and the Secret Rings before, then you do realize about the fact that one of those mission types, which appears to be beat the clock, meaning about the fact that you need to go from point A to point B within a time limit. So this means about the fact that if your time actually runs out, you have to restart the entire mission all over again. So because of that though, yeah, it's nothing new or anything else like that, except now, this game is very generous when it comes to giving you a lot of extra time, unlike the forms of how it does it on some stages from Sonic and the Secret Rings when it comes to beat the clock missions. That sometimes though is about the fact that the best method to try to complete those missions like that is by simply utilizing the forms of the soul gauge within Speed Break. Although, technically for this game, about the fact that Speed Break does technically returns, but it's pretty much useless, because aside from the fact that we can't able to actually try to use it all the time, because when the enemies do somehow turn up, this means about the fact that we have to do a lot of timing skills and what have you when it comes to utilizing the Soul Surge. So that's the only thing I was going to able to try to point things out. So yeah, basically though it's about the fact that we need to get out of here before we're able to actually decide to become one of the most, well, it's hard for me to explain personally though, because even then, like I said before, it's been about a couple of hours since I actually have last played this, you know? So anyways, a few things I want to talk about this is though, and that's what appears to be for the fact that, well, today's date, of course, there is the 31st of August today, in some cases in 2025 today, and you know what that means is the final day of August, before we move on to the 9th month, which appears to be September. So because of that though, I can't even believe it's actually getting very close to the point where the hype is about to build up for certain aspects, specifically though, for supposedly a Nintendo Direct coming up soon. Well, I highly doubt it. Well, even then though, we'll have to wait and see what happens, especially considering about the fact that when it comes to the forms of August though, the only Nintendo Direct that we've only got, which appears to be both ND World, which I found was very disappointing to be honest, and then the other one, which is actually the main focus of Kirby Air Riders, which I honestly really do enjoy. Especially considering about the fact I still cared about, you know, Kirby stuff after all, especially considering about the fact that, well, obviously though, after when Kirby Air Riders did somehow finally comes out until November, I'm very curious to know what's going to be up next in terms of Kirby franchises or anything else like that, aside from the fact that until 2 years time, for specifically 2027, that will obviously marks the 35th anniversary of the Kirby series. So, alongside with the forms of the 25th anniversary of the Kingdom Hearts games, and yeah, pretty much as far as you might able to expect of what's to come, for the likes of in 2027 and beyond. So, but I digress. And also straight to the point is about the fact that until specifically, I would say, until specifically like 6 months time or something like that, though I'm sure there might be a possibility for the fact that the Legend of Zelda series will be also going to be celebrating its 40th anniversary at some point in 2026, and of course, not to mention though, you know, not only the 35th anniversary of Sonic the Hedgehog series, but in addition to the forms of the 25th anniversary of the Super Monkey Ball series. So, because of that though, you probably already realize about that, and it's also worth knowing for that yes, next year will also mark the 30th anniversary of Crash Bandicoot. So, yeah, that's gonna be pretty exciting, because the last time we actually got a Crash Bandicoot game was actually Crash Team Rumble, with mixed results on PlayStation 4, PS5, Xbox One, Xbox Series X/S, and I'm still generally surprised that that game never gets launched on not only Nintendo Switch 1, but in addition to Nintendo Switch 2 version as well, which I'm not exactly sure why that's the case, mind you. But regardless of such, though, is about the fact that I suppose that that particular topic can wait, assuming if that particular Nintendo Direct will come, probably at some point in the midway portion of September, around the time when Nintendo will able to indeed decide able to celebrate the 40th anniversary of the Super Mario Bros. Franchise, but then again, we have to wait and see what happens in due time. So, but there we go. That pretty much does it for Knight's Passage. And as you can tell, I somehow got 3 stars, so it's not too shabby for the most part. Although I do remember for a fact that Sonic did tell me he usually struggles with that stage on his first playthrough.
So, it was all part of Merlina's plot.
It keeps spreading.
It's only a matter of time before the kingdom is consumed.
Ugh. The Knights of the Round Table. Must we simply stand and watch our kingdom's ruin?
Gawain.
What? Are you gonna give up just like that? Is that the best that chivalry of yours can do?
How dare you!
Listen, it's like I said before. Isn't there more to being a knight than serving a king?
Sir Sonic is right. And there's still time if you act now. Use the sacred swords to form a barrier around the castle.
For the kingdom and its people!
For the kingdom and its people!
I'm counting on you.
Sir Sonic, what will you do?
Once the barrier's up, I'll look for a chance to jump in.
Surely you jest.
Nah, it's just how I roll.
Fare thee well. We too shall fulfill our appointed task.
And it's also reassuring about the fact that we somehow got the unexpected update in regards to the forms of Final Fantasy VII Remake integrate specifically on Switch 2, which we'll talk more about that in a second, because as you can see, we can now have the ability to go into not only 1, not 2, but 3 more stages, which appears to be Shrouded Forest, as well as Great Megalith, and the Cauldron levels. And suffice to say though, in addition to that, we can also have the ability to play as not only Sir Lancelot, but also Sir Gawain and Sir Percival in the actual adventure mode. So yeah, that's actually quite interesting, all things considered. Well, here's the catch though, that in order able to play as those 3 Knights of the Round Table, they are only accessible in some stages, as you can see on screen, that we actually got ourselves red dotted levels. So meaning about the fact that if it's a blue dotted, it's going to be only for Sonic, whilst in the forms of it, they did say red dots, meaning about the fact that you not only can play as Sonic, but in addition to Sir Lancelot, as well as Sir Gawain and Sir Percival. So meaning about the fact that there's actually a lot of replayability if you want to go for a multitude of playable characters in the adventure mode. So yeah, that's actually quite interesting. So obviously though, if you couldn't tell already, in addition to play as not only Lancelot, but also Gawain or Percival, or should I say Shadow, Knuckles, and Blaze. Obviously though, in addition to that, we can also able to change the styles now, and on top of that, we can also able to actually now craft weapons and also equip them. Well, here's the thing though, when it comes to the weapon option, you cannot able to actually change the weapon for Sonic, because obviously Sonic is still stuck around with Caliburn, and meanwhile when it comes to Lancelot, Gawain, and Percival, they can obviously able to actually craft weapons, and of course changing weapons as far as cosmetic itself is considered with. So like if you couldn't tell already, we actually did manage to collect some of those materials for the sake of the previous missions. Well, mind you though, we've only collected some of them though, so meaning we can only show off one of those crafted weapons, which as far as I'm aware, I'm pretty sure it's going to be more specifically for Shadow's case. So as a result though, yeah, there's a lot of crafting as far as, you know, doing that as far as I'm aware. So at the moment, we can only craft one weapon, so, yeah. And I'm sure enough that when it says you can craft now, meaning about the fact that we can now able to craft the new weapon for, one of the 3 Knights of the Round Table, basically. So, yeah, I guess it's that, basically. So yeah, here's this particular sword, which I'm pretty sure it's only for Sir Lancelot, so, or in some cases Shadow, so you can obviously equip that. And I don't think it does that much status as far as I'm aware, aside from, like I said before, it's most likely for its cosmetic changes as far as I'm aware of, so... And I think we are essentially done with this for the sake of time. And speaking of which though, let's go ahead and choose Sir Lancelot to start with in the forms of Shrouded Forest. So, because obviously though it's almost like the equivalent to Deep Woods. Because obviously though this place does manage to take place in the forest. But this time, it's actually now to the point where the fact that not only we can able to come across into some of those familiar enemies from the previous levels, but in addition to that though, we could also come across into even more enemy types, thanks to the forms of Molina's Deafening Society or something like that, which, again, is a bit tricky to explain, because even then though, that, you know, I have to try to concentrate while, oh! Okay then, so if you do manage to able to use the Soul Surge ability as Shadow or Sir Lancelot, basically though, he can able to actually just do a instant transmission, and as a result though, he can also try to perform a Chaos Control, which, if you're familiar with that particular Chaos Control ability, sends Shadow the Hedgehog. However though, unlike in Shadow the Hedgehog though, it's now going to be utilized with motion controls with sword swinging, so... yeah, for the most part, Shadow is actually pretty cool to use, especially considering for the fact I have no issues while playing as him. But when it comes to the forms of one of those 3 Knights of the Round Table, notice that some of these playable characters do have their specific disadvantages sometimes, compared to Sonic with Cauldron, which I'll explain more about that in a second, because as you can tell, sometimes though, the actual specific Soul Surge timing skills when it comes to Sir Lancelot does take a bit of like few seconds to able to react to in time, but for the most part though, this stage is not too shabby for the most part, until the Cauldron level, because my god, I've heard so many frustrating moments when it comes to the Cauldron level as far as I'm aware of, and you might see nothing yet, especially considering about the fact that, well, there's going to be a lot of frustration, and also, well, if you couldn't tell already, for the fact that we are obviously going to be choosing some of these playable characters that are much more suited for the sake of the forms of their previous environments that we somehow already face up against with the, you know, 3 Knights of the Round Table as Sonic with Caliburn. So because of that, for instance though, with Shrouded Forest, we attempt to select Shadow or Sir Lancelot in this level, just because, you know, we've already fought against him somewhere in the forest, in the deep woods. And then meanwhile, once we get to Great Megalith, we have to choose Sir Gawain, or Knuckles for that matter. Oh, and by the way, if you dare come across into those butterflies right there, that way, these enemies will turn into treasures somehow. Meaning about the fact that it actually causes us a confusion effect. So meaning about the fact that it's almost like a reality shift or something like that. So chances are though is about the fact that it's probably best for you to keep on attacking the butterflies until you go back into its normal state, and then that way you can able to defeat more enemies in between. So, but I digress. So, oh yeah, back into what I was saying about the phones that Final Fantasy VII Remake integrate on Switch 2 specifically. I've almost first thought about the fact that that game is going to be run at 40 FPS on Switch 2, but it turns out it was false the whole time, because actually as it turns out, Square Enix has just confirmed for the fact that Final Fantasy VII Remake integrate on Switch 2 has now been gone into 30 frames per second within a slowest cap. So yeah, that's very unexpected, although mind you though, the game itself still hasn't been confirmed the release date for it, but regardless of such though, it's about the fact I'm still very excited able to actually finally get a chance to play that game on the go, and on top of that, experience the game for myself, because obviously though, it's a shame I missed out on not only the PlayStation 4 version, but in addition to the PlayStation 5 version as well, so that way, this will be a perfect opportunity for me to try out Final Fantasy VII Remake for the first time, so yeah, that's going to be pretty exciting on my book, so there we go, so that pretty much does it for this level. So of course, as we expected though, we need to beat the stage within a time limit, because again, if your time actually runs out, you have to start all over at the beginning. So because of that though, although if you accidentally die in a beat the clock missions, at the very least the checkpoints are kind of generous sometimes, whilst most of the time, certain checkpoints are very stingy sometimes. Like, I'm looking at the forms of the Cauldron level, by the way, because, again, we'll talk more about that if we dive into that particular stage as Sir Percival. So because of that though, yes, why classify that?
This must be a barrier stone. This stone is but part of the ring that sealeth the Dark Hollow. Dark Hollow? What is Merlina up to now?
Oh yeah, I surprisingly forgot to mention about this since in the very beginning of this Let's Play, by the way. This is technically the final Sonic game to able to feature the 4Kids voice cast if you don't account the forms of not only Mario and Sonic at the Olympic Winter Games, and in addition to Sonic and Sega All-Stars Racing, because some of these voice clips are basically reused from not only Mario and Sonic at the Olympic Games, by the way, but in addition to the majority of Sonic 06, specifically in Sonic and Sega All-Stars Racing by the counts as far as I'm aware of. So anyway, so let's go ahead and move on to the next level, but like I said before, we're about to switch over to Sir Gawain this time, because obviously though, Great Megalith is basically, it's almost like a nighttime version of Titanic Plain, so because of that though, I guess that makes it pretty obvious that we're going to be using Sir Gawain, or Knuckles to be more specifically. So yeah, in terms of how Knuckles plays out in this game though, he's actually pretty good in any some sort of like a melee attacks as far as I'm aware. But I will admit though, the Soul Surge attacks feels a bit unreliable to me. That's just mainly because it's all about timing, obviously. And second of all, they literally just try to able to throw his sword, by the way, as projectiles. But I found it was a little bit too unreliable for my taste. But apart from that, you can able to actually do all sorts of like crazy sword attacks, by the way, on the ground. So that way you can able to actually do the ridiculous amount of combos if you're trying to able to perform it right. And in addition to that, similar to the forms of how it does it in not only Sonic the Hedgehog 3, and Knuckles specifically, and in addition to Sonic Blast, Sonic Adventure, Sonic Adventure 2, and as well as Sonic the Hedgehog 2006, Sir Gawain does have the ability to glide, so meaning about the fact you can able to actually go in midair for about a few seconds notice, so just like the forms of how it does in the good old Mega Drive days, or Sega Genesis days, if you lived in America. So, yeah, that seems pretty cool and everything, so, and there's also reassuring about this too, is about the fact that, like I said earlier, thankfully the time limit is very generous enough, as long as you don't die so many times, because otherwise, if you do die several times, that means the time will carry over from that particular state. So, that's something we need to able to worth considering about, just like the forms of how it does it on any other Sonic games, like, you know, Sonic and the Secret Rings, when it comes to beat the clock missions, and in addition to, Sonic Unleashed on Wii and PlayStation 2 for daytime stages, alongside with the forms of Sonic Unleashed, also for the sake of the forms of, not only for the Xbox 360, but as well as the PlayStation 3 version as well. And before that, there was also Sonic Colors, and also honorable mentions for Sonic Colors Ultimate, by the way, if you want to count that. And of course, Sonic Generations, and I believe also Sonic Forces, and also the cyberspace segments in Sonic Frontiers, and of course, Shadow Generations. I think so anyway, depending if you do manage to activate the checkpoint as far as I'm aware of. So, but I digress. Look how many combos that I somehow pull off, or how much hits I somehow got, which is pretty insane. Although, you can also try to able to experience those stages as Sonic as well, to make things a little bit more balanced, because, well, relatively speaking, though, sometimes, though, that you're essentially going to be in standstill while you're trying to able to perform a sword swinging attacks as Sir Gawain. So, as a result, though, because like I said before, I feel like the Soul Surge ability can be felt a bit unreliable at times. So, because of that, though, there's also reassuring about this too, is about the fact that certain levels are very lengthy for the most part. So because of that though, and you can also try to rescue those townspeople from that particular cage we need to able to get out of by simply attacking those little key locks, so yeah, that's always swell. But yeah, for the most part though, that's as far as I can try to say about the forms of today's topic at this point. I mean, again, I would have liked able to explain about the forms of what's been going on for the sake of the forms of Kirby and the Forgotten Land, Nintendo Switch 2 edition, plus Star-Crossed World. But it's just for the sake of convenience though, it's about the fact that I haven't exactly found out the actual reviews of the actual entire expansion as far as I'm aware just yet. But I do know for certain, for one thing, that one of those reviewers, specifically Nintendo Life in general, does manage to able to receive the entire expansion for about 9 out of 10, so it's like pretty much awesome expansion indeed. So some people seem to say for the fact that that particular expansion is going to be a lot better than the forms of how it does it for Super Mario Party Jamboree Switch 2 edition, which I'm sure enough though that Maxi will definitely get into more details about that if he decides to able to show off the Switch 2 exclusive content for the Switch 2 edition for Super Mario Party Jamboree. Assuming, of course, about the fact that we haven't exactly set up the actual capture device for that particular Switch 2 system as of right now, because obviously, though, that we are still working on not only Sonic and the Black Knight, but in addition to the Switch 1 version of, you know, Super Mario Party Jamboree, so... But of course, if you couldn't tell already from earlier, unfortunately though, we've come across into our first death of the playthrough. So because of that though, mainly because, again, sometimes the motion controls can be pretty much hit and miss sometimes. And it's also reassuring about the fact that sometimes though, the movements can be felt a bit slightly iffy sometimes when it comes to some scenarios. But it's also I did not pay attention to that particular spiky little hazard as far as I did somehow come across into earlier. So... But on the plus side is, though, it's about the fact that at the very least we're nearly at the end of this level, so, and it's also reassuring about this too, is about the fact you do able to actually get one of those unlockable characters, by the way, on one specific condition of this particular mission, and that's where it appears to be involved around. We must able to actually achieve the 5-star ranking, and then once you're done with that, you're able to actually unlock one of those extra playable characters in battle mode, which... I'm sure enough that we'll get into more details about that if we dive into some tiny little extras for Sonic and the Black Knight, just to see how this game actually has to offer for us. So, and, oh, so close to get all 5 stars in this mission as Sir Gawain, if only for the fact I don't want to die on that final stretch of this entire mission, or the entire stage, I should say. So, oh well, no big deal, but at the very least I still managed to able to unlock that character on my main file at the very least, so that's always something. So, anyways, let's bring out some more items in the items codex system, and for the most part we actually got some new ones for sure, and then others we've already got since previously. So, yeah, that pretty much does it for Great Megalith.
Here it is. Yeah! When the sacred sword pierces stone, so shall return the power. What of Excalibur, greatest of all sacred swords? The king wore its scabbard, but I never saw the sword itself.
Oh, and by the way, something worth noting for is that every time whenever you do complete beat the clock missions in some stages like this one, we obviously got ourselves an additional mission as well. So much to the point we've got ourselves Die Hard Challenge, which means that we have to complete the mission without even getting defeated. That sounds familiar to you, doesn't it? Since, you know, Sonic and the Secret Rings, basically. So, anyway, so that being said, let's go ahead and move on to... the Cauldron. In fact, let's get this stage over and done with before I'm able to actually end off the video there. And suffice to say, before you're able to actually dive into this particular stage right there, which is of course the Cauldron, we need to double check on the specific crafting things we can able to sort out. And I don't think we've actually got enough materials for that. So, oh well, we'll let it be. So anyway, let's go and switch over to the final playable character in the adventure mode, and that's of course Sir Percival, or Blaze the Cat to be more specifically. And here we go into, without a doubt, is my least favorite stage in the entire game in my opinion. That's of course the Cauldron, like I said earlier. So what's so bad about this stage in particular to me though, this stage is pretty stingy when it comes to checkpoints, and on top of that, the enemy placements can be downright brutal at times, at least the attacks aren't registered sometimes, and also as far as I'm aware, Sir Percival is great in everything, but I will admit though, the actual control style just feels a bit kind of finicky at times. Well, on the ground it's not that much of a problem, but as far as trying to do on airborne attacks, sometimes it just feels a bit unreliable to me. And for her Soul Surge ability is that she can able to actually perform a Flame Tornado, just like the forms of how it does in one of the boss fights that we've already done. And also, I do sort of remember that Sonic did tell me about this, is that back in 9 years ago, despite the entire previous Let's Players no longer there, that, my goodness, back then, I've heard for the fact that Sonic told me that one of the toys in particular actually swears a lot. Specifically, F-bombs in particular, and on top of all that stuff though, they just got rage quit a lot. Specifically in this stage, while playing as the forms of Sir Percival, because obviously though, that the Cauldron itself is basically based off from, the equivalent to the forms of Molten Mine, but only now for the fact it's now in nighttime as opposed to sunset. So, yeah, that's as far as I can try able to describe about this particular stage sometimes. So, and oh boy, as soon as we get to this part right there, that if you dare fall into the lava, you die instantly. And to make matters worse, like I said before, the checkpoint system in this level is very stingy, and so much to the point for the fact that if you dare manage to play as Sir Percival in this particular part right there, good luck with that, because you're gonna die a lot. And it's also reassuring about this too, much like the previous 3 stages we've already been into, like Knight's Passage, and in addition to Shrouded Forest and Great Megalith, we have to do it with a time limit too. So because of that though, meaning no time needs to be wasted. So yeah, that's as far as I can really say about this, I guess, I suppose. I mean, at the very least though, the music is actually pretty alright, but it's just about the fact I don't listen to this particular music as much compared to the majority of the soundtrack in Sonic and the Black Knight, because there are certain tracks I really do enjoy, such as, of course, Misty Lake, and in addition to, you know, Night of the Wind, and of course, Deep Woods especially, along with others as well, because even then though, they are certainly really good, especially it's been performed by Jun Sano, which obviously he already did done the other Sonic games as well, ranging from Sonic Adventure when it comes to composing the actual entire soundtrack, along with the forms of Sonic Adventure 2, among all any other Sonic games for that matter. So, although I will say though is about the fact that when it comes to Sonic the Hedgehog 4 Episode 1 and Episode 2 soundtrack, they all sound very underwhelming. Well, there are certain tracks I still managed to enjoy for Sonic the Hedgehog 4 when it comes to Episode 1 and Episode 2. Well, aside from the fact that they just feels more accurately like a, well, it's hard for me to explain personally, but anyway, so. And also as far as I'm aware, what if you do manage to come across into, wall running as far as I'm aware, because apparently though she can miraculously try to able to walk on the wall within either on the top or the left or the right, but most of the time though, I will admit it though, it can be felt a bit slightly finicky sometimes as well, especially because I was trying to press the A button what I was meant to do, so I need to hold down the A button in order able to continue our progression as far as I'm aware, and sometimes though, I accidentally managed able to let Sir Percival try to swing her sword instead, which for the most part though, it can be rather felt a bit too finicky sometimes. But apart from those aside things though, thankfully though, at the very least this particular stage doesn't give me that much trouble, especially because considering for the fact as much as I love, you know, Blaze the Cat so much, but at the very least though, it's about the fact that it's nice able to actually play as not only Sir Percival, but Blaze the Cat in general, but in a 3D perspective. So yeah, that's actually pretty swell if you ask me, especially unlike Sonic Rush and Sonic Rush Adventure is most likely taking place in 2.5D sometimes, or in some cases entirely in 2D, so but anyway, this stage is pretty much over and done with, which I'm super appreciative about that, especially because I'm not a big fan of this level, so as a result, I got myself my miserable 2-star ranking ever since Titanic Plane, but I was like, you know what, whatever, I'll just let it slide. So because of that, now we've basically done the Cauldrons, I suppose, in addition about the fact that we can able to actually access to more items, such as the new book, and on top of that, we can also able to actually access the well, let's say a medicine potion or something like that, or more materials as far as I'm aware, we should able to actually access to the next level, which suffice to say, that way we'll save that up and do it at some point in next Saturday.
This must be it. Our fate is now in your hands, Sir Sonic.
I mean, like I said earlier, Blaze, my love, I suppose we'll have to save that particular next level, which appears to be Dragon Flare, and join at some point on next Saturday, because, relatively speaking, all we need to do now is about the fact that we need to activate the final podium, as far as I'm aware, for inserting the sword, but now we can able to actually play as Sonic for specifically trying to go into the next level. So, anyways though, suffice to say for this point guys, we should probably end things off this point right here. So join me next time for some more of Let's Play of Sonic and the Black Knight, is that we're about to be experiencing the next level, which is going to be taking place in Dragon's Lair. It is almost like the equivalent to Crystal Cave, but much more serious than that. So this will be interesting. So I'll see you guys until next Saturday. Later, fellas.